Scott Goldberg, nice seeing you.
Nice to see you as well.
We're at the EDS conference. Your reputation precedes you because I live in a very specific world. I am a development professional. Everything I do is development focused. If it's not fundraising, it's really outside of my purview. But at the same time, I encounter a lot of challenges organizations may have where they're dealing with a challenging board of directors. They might not have the right people in the right positions. So over the years, I've known clients of mine to have engaged your services in a variety of capacities. You've worked with executive coaching of some of the clients of mine. You've done strategic planning on an organizational level, not necessarily just specific fundraising, but as an organization level. And you're involved also in executive recruiting, right? You're also in search as well for getting the right people into the right positions, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, excellent. So this is my experience with you, and obviously the people who I talk to speak very highly of you. We're at the EDS conference in Orlando, and obviously you're here, and you're providing your expertise. You gave a session, correct?
I did.
All right, you're done.
No, I gave a session today on time management.
Okay.
And I'll give one tomorrow on board governance.
On board
governance.
Governance.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not done yet. Okay.
Not quite done.
Okay.
And actually, as you know, at these conferences, the in between the sessions and opportunities to have conversations like this are really what it's about.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So I would love to talk to you a little bit about your experience in the space. We have obviously a very extensive audience of 3,000 plus professionals in Jewish education specifically. And I'm sure there are certain things that you've encountered, whether it's board governance challenges or some things you're seeing on an individual level for executive coaching and things like that. What are some of the, I would say, high-level things that you've encountered? Obviously things that would appeal to, that you've seen that is a kind of a common denominator for many institutions. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered?
Well, thank you. I appreciate very much you having me on this on this
Absolute
podcast.
Pleasure.
So this conference really, I think, brings together a number of those issues and highlights them. Right, you have executive directors and you have people in various levels of the institution. And by levels, I don't mean hierarchically in terms of some type of one better than the next,
right.
But in terms of how people work with each other. I was just in a conversation with a CEO of a yeshiva where they were discussing, and they mentioned that they have an organizational challenge. And what they meant was structural.
Right.
Right, they meant, does everybody have clarity of roles and responsibilities?
Right, where their job begins, where their job ends,
right.
Who they report to.
And oftentimes we'll get a call from a board that says, we don't have an org chart. We want an org chart.
Right.
Can you help us with an org chart?
Right.
We get conversations from heads of school. Can we do an org chart? I really need to possibly reevaluate people and see what the roles and responsibilities are on the line.
Sure.
Can we do an org chart? I regularly say I think it's just it's oftentimes barking up the wrong tree.
Okay.
The example I always give is the federal government. We know what everybody's roles and responsibilities are supposed to be. The Constitution says it. Lots of documents say it. It's been a few hundred years.
Plenty of documentation.
Plenty of documentation.
Right.
And nonetheless, if we ask, what's the paradigm of dysfunctional organization?
The government.
We would say the U.S. government. So, what's going on there? And really what it comes down to, in my opinion, and the work that we do oftentimes in going into an institution, listening very carefully to the various lay and professional leaders, and frankly, the rebbeim and the teachers and others within the institution, what we see is that it's actually about culture. It's actually about how we're working with each other.
Okay.
It's not just about, this is my responsibility, that's your responsibility, this is my role, that's your role, but it's in this particular project or in this process, what's my involvement supposed to be? When are you going to consult with me? Are you going to consult with me? Am I supposed to be in this conversation? Am I on the email chain because I actually add value, or am I just on because you decided to put me on the email chain?
Right.
Am I in this meeting because I'm supposed to be, because I'm a decision maker, or am I just being consulted here? What's going on in terms of how we work? And oftentimes, in between the meetings, in between the emails, we have people who get concerned about their role
right.
in the process, how they're included or not included. Are they a decision maker or are they not? And that I would, we broadly define organizationally as culture. Mm-hmm. That's not a structural challenge.
No.
That's an organizational challenge, but organizational in terms of culture.
Interesting, but culture is hard to change. And I also know from experience that culture, the way to change culture tends to be by putting in new habits, right? It's not something you can't buy everyone a pies of pizza and do a team building exercise and expect that to change. What has been your experience in how to implement some of these really big challenges?
Sure, I think that the key is a willingness to invest in the long term. Think about it's like a diet,
Okay.
right? You can quickly lose weight. Everybody has
Right.
the hack to lose weight.
Right.
But are you going to consistently implement not just let's bring everybody into the woods and let's see whether or not we can fall into each other's arms? Nice idea.
Right.
Maybe it's fun.
Right.
And it's a day off and we get to wear fleeces. But at the end of the day, that's not necessarily going to change how it is that we interact when we're on the ground in the institution. And communication in that space is really important. Am I given permission to give feedback to the various people within the organization of how it is that I'm experiencing the work? Am I open to hearing how others are experiencing me and my work? And that oftentimes doesn't happen unfacilitated. So we find that as an organizational psychologist, the opportunity to be able to understand an organization is to understand the people. Understand how they interact with each other, their emotions, how they feel and act based on those emotions, how they interact based on feedback or lack of feedback, assumptions, narratives that people write about themselves and others,
Wow.
and also the organization. Are we an organization that is a go-get-em attitude because we have people who have a go-get-em attitude, or are we an organization that is, well, it's the best we can do. What do you expect of me?
Right.
Everybody shows up late to meetings, but it's not about showing up late. It's a matter of do we actually care
Right.
about the work we're doing, and do we care about each other?
Interesting. So, I would imagine that because you're exposed to many organizations, when you're talking about things like executive recruitment, it's not just about finding someone for a job. Is the right person going into the right institution? Because everything you're describing means having a deep understanding of what the culture is of that organization, and there are absolutely professionals who might excel and do wonderful work in one place, but will be an abysmal failure somewhere else. What does that look like? How do you? Is it just something that you? A feeling you have from doing it for years, and therefore you can say this person will succeed in this place, or are there certain kind of parameters? I don't know if there's existing KPIs of some kind to say, oh, this person will do well in an institution like this. How does that matchmaking work?
Yeah. So I want to step back for a second.
Okay.
No, it's okay. I'll answer the question about the matchmaking, but I do want to say a lot of organizations or companies start as executive recruiters, and then because of the nature of the work that they do with transition planning of someone entering after they place somebody, and then continued work within the organization, they develop a coaching arm or they develop a strategy arm.
Right.
We went the other way.
I see.
What happened was we were involved in coaching and strategy of leaders, and what was happening is organizations we were working with saw that it was so important to see an executive hire as an inflection point about the organization and about leadership. So that just as coaching might be one opportunity to be able to make change and improvement, and strategic planning to align an organization might be an opportunity to change for improvement.
Sure.
So too, sometimes you get to a point where you just say, even though this person is great,
Right.
they're not going to take us to the next place.
Got it.
And therefore, organizationally, that's where people started reaching out to us and say, you know a lot of people, you know the work, you know the culture piece, you know the leadership piece. How can you help us be able to make that inflection point meaningful? So we actually, I would say, a small part of our work, and a small part of our overall practice, and it's important to recognize that we do have that wax and wane in terms of the needs,
Right.
but it is not the main focus of the work. Nonetheless, how do you know? So someone once shared with me that there are these indicators of success.
Okay.
So someone once said to me that if a resume at the end of every line has periods, that's an indicator that the person will be successful in their job, because their
Really?
attention to detail. It's an indicator of
I
that.
thought it was just my neuroses, but apparently it means much
No,
more.
I think that your neuroses are another person's necessities in terms of expertise
Right.
or
Okay,
accomplishment.
fine. Got it.
But I do think that, I think we're all searching for is there a silver bullet? Is there a way to be able to guarantee this person's going to succeed, this person's not?
Right.
There's a reason why when you have executive recruiters, they oftentimes have a warranty in the contract.
Yeah.
Right? Whether is the person still seated 6 months later, a year later, whatever it might be. Because it is so important that it's a culture fit. So things that we do, which I think are important for executive recruitment, whether or not you're doing it yourself or whether or not you're hiring someone to do it. Interviews will only get you so far. That's whether or not this person has some understanding of the work. Are they a nice person? Can you spend time with this person? Can you imagine being with this person for an extended period of time? But it's not going to tell you whether or not the person actually will succeed, not only at the tasks that you're asking them to, but in the organization itself. So how do you make that work? So we have, as a part of our process, simulations. Just like you would in a finance firm where you walk into, you're going to be an analyst, they give you a data set and they ask you, here are some questions, figure it out, come back in a couple of hours with some results and implications for us. So we do the same thing. What is the job? So if you're going to be a head of school, so there's different systems, right? There's the education part of it, there's the leadership of the team, there's the aspects of governance that you have to work with a board, there's the operations, there's the finance of the institution, you're the CEO. So every single aspect of those systems gets simulated. So you are playing head of school for a few days where you're interacting with hours of just interaction with the board, with team members, etc., being that person. And some of them are a little bit more contrived than others, but you get to see, is the person capable not only of doing the work, and are they good at answering questions, but are they able to work with us? Are we able to work with them? And by the way, it's just as much an interview for them, seeing are they a fit, are the people are these people I want to work with? Right. So that's a major part of the process of seeing and doing your due diligence, not just through interviews, I like this person, but can they do the work? And I'll tell you, when we hire within our own firm, we do that too. We have simulations to see whether or not people are joining my team. We hope that we like to practice what we preach, but are our team members a good fit, or are we a good fit for them? That's very helpful to hear. I guess because we're focused on fundraising and that's our audience, obviously there's a tremendous frustration around finding talented development professionals. There's a lot of mediocrity in the space, so there's a lot of people who might be able to talk a big game, but don't necessarily deliver results. They might hide behind their computer in their office and not necessarily doing what needs to get done. And there's a big frustration. There's obviously a big need, right? Everyone's saying, oh, do you know anybody who's good, who we can hire? And again, from my experience I've seen is that, the resume definitely doesn't tell you the whole story, or even most of the story. That sometimes the person who doesn't have a deep bench of experience, but is someone who is, from within, who's been under their nose the entire time, could end up being a much better candidate, someone who might come in and be someone who is clearly the face of the organization in a way that someone on the outside might be perceived as a hired gun or something like that. What has been your experience on the development side of work with finding talent and trying to control as much as you can to get the right person in the right position? Yeah, I think you're right. There is a dearth of talent out there. Just like we could say there's a dearth of talent out there in terms of executive directors of schools, in terms of heads of school, educational leaders, teachers. I think that if you look globally, we're within a larger crisis of talent, development of people at different levels of work, people's interest in work. So that I think it's important to realize it's not just a Jewish. It's not a Jewish problem. It's a there are plenty of other Jewish problems that we've created, Crohn's and also that others is a Jewish problem, and others have made Jewish problems, or that we're the fault. But this is not an anti-Semitism issue. Yes. So no I do think it's important to contextualize that. I think it goes back to some of the same issues. You have to define what success looks like, and you have to define a timeline for it. Right. If you're in the midst of a situation where you need to accomplish certain things within your institution, certain outcomes, capital fundraising outcomes, annual gift outcomes, you need to be able to engage the community in certain ways that you haven't engaged before, and it has to be done in 12-month period. Right. You're not hiring someone within who doesn't have any experience. You're not hiring someone from without who doesn't have any experience. And therefore you're going to have to pay for talent, and you might even have to pay beyond what the market would suggest. However, if you take the long view and say, what does our organization need to look like in 3 to 5 years? And say, what is the talent we're going to develop internally? And how are we going to make sure that even when we hire our development director, what's our succession plan? Are we going to be a farm team for other people? Recognizing that our number 2 and 3 and 4 may very well become a development director somewhere else, if they want to be, and therefore treat yourself like the Montreal Expos, where you have a wonderful farm team, and then you export them to every other team. I'll give a shout out to a day school that did this for years, and they viewed themselves this. There was the Oakland Hebrew Day School. in Oakland, California. When Dan Cohn, who's now living in Renana with his family, he was there as president. He told me this explicitly at the time. But they hired people that they knew if they can get 5 years out of them, that was a lot already.
Right.
And they explicitly, when they were looking for heads, they wanted to have a longer run potentially, and they would welcome the longer run, but they understood that they were in Oakland and they could offer something unique to the people coming in. And they hired people who, there was one head they hired, I think, at 25 years old.
Wow.
And that person is now making extraordinary contributions to the Jewish people
in
the Jewish educational space, decades later. And multiple people who were in that job are now making multiple contributions across the world in terms of the Jewish community. So I think that one has to decide who you want to be, where you see yourself in the space. The title of your podcast reminds me of something I years ago I was asked to speak about what at the time was starting to be called the Shidduch crisis.
Yeah, the Shidduch crisis,
in the community. What was I going to possibly say? I was a young educator, psychologist, and what am I possibly going to say? So I had the following thought, and this has always resonated with me years later in many contexts, which is we sometimes make these laundry lists of the people we want based on who we think we are.
Right.
What we don't do is to stop and say, would the person that I just described want me?
Right.
And I think that really resonates with the same question related to hiring a development director particularly. We say we have a X $1 million campaign annually. We have a Y $1 million capital campaign and the like. We need to be able to raise the following money.
Right.
We want the following people. But here are all of the different boundaries that we're going to put in place, all the different limitations we're going to put in place. It has to be this kind of person, it has to be that kind of person, this person, that person. They have to have lived here. They have to know this community, that community. They have to have access to people as if you're buying a Rolodex, which
Right.
is also just use a strong term, absurd.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
And I think that one has to stop and say, okay, who are we as a school? Are we a place that we should be taking a number 2 or 3 for someplace else, and this is an opportunity for them? Are we looking to just hire someone who has number 1 experience, which is going to be different than a number 2 or number 3 within an institution? They just play different roles. But can we find an institution that we can partner with that we know they're giving the number 2s and 3s an experience
Yes.
that sets them up?
Right. And unless you like dating, unless you know yourself and what your priorities are and what you're bringing the best, like this is what I have to offer, only then can you go find somebody who will be the right fit for you.
Correct. And there are many times where an organization will reach out to us and say, can you help us with a search? And we advise them that they're not ready because they haven't done enough internal work and strategic work to be able to have clarity as to what they're looking for.
Interesting.
And sometimes that means you need to say it's going to be a 24-month period or an 18-month period where they're going to have an interim. And that's part of the analysis and part of the calculus
Right.
of the next 24 months to be able to get someone who's the right person in place. Much better to do some thinking in the interim and get the right person in place based on who you are, because
Right.
you've done that thinking.
Right.
Than necessarily look at it from a perspective of we already know who we are, or we're going to hire somebody else and they're going to help us figure out who we are.
Right.
It doesn't work as
No,
well.
it's a very costly endeavor too.
Right.
So if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right.
It also doesn't honor the people in the community who are who are there, who have been there, and will continue to be there. Your donor base, your community base, and the like. Because what it does, especially with development director, says this new person's going to come in and they're going to strategize. They're going to tell us what our strategy should be.
Right.
Yes, it's true. They should be helpful in navigating the issues of strategy. But really what should be going on is that we build the capacity of the community, perhaps with some facilitation from outside, perhaps not, to be able to develop a strategy that's healthy for them, that brings this person in based on this is what we need, therefore we're going to hire someone based on the need that we've articulated and identified.
Right. That's incredible. I mean, I really appreciate your time here, Scott. I mean, I think this is something that I think everybody can come away with something here. This is a very heavy, and it's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, a lot of this stuff, because what you're describing is great. If someone wants to reach out to you, wants to be able to, whether it's work with you on strategic planning or executive coaching, or executive search, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
They can certainly look at our website, scottgoldbergconsulting.com. They can email directly to me, scott@scottgoldbergconsulting.com, and reach out to us that way. There is an opportunity for people on the website to reach out as well and fill out a form there but we certainly welcome anyone to reach out, and even just to check in to see if they're ready for one of those opportunities. Oftentimes there's a readiness step that we can inform that we're not quite ready,
Sure.
and that can be helpful. But there's so much great work going on in the Jewish community between volunteers, need for governance work and the like, and certainly the volunteers don't get enough thanks. The professionals oftentimes don't either, and we're really here to support them to continue to be able to grow the community and grow the schools, grow the organizations that serve the community.
Beautiful. And obviously I look forward to your talk tomorrow. And then you can breathe a little bit and then do more of the networking. But I really, really, really appreciate your time here today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right.